Okay, picture this. You're standing right next to a massive commercial jet engine, but instead of being on a plane, it's bolted to a concrete pad, just cranking out continuous power. It's incredible engineering, right? But all of that raw power literally boils down to one absolute fundamental thing: what you're feeding it. Look, inside a jet-class gas turbine, combustion is happening incredibly fast, and it never stops. If your fuel quality is off by even a tiny fraction of a speck, well, you're not just losing a little efficiency, you are setting the stage for some catastrophic, incredibly expensive damage right inside the hot section of that engine. So let's get into this explainer and see exactly why. Right off the bat, we've got to establish the unbending operational law of this machine. Now, this engine features a dual-fuel combustion system. That means, sure, it can run on natural gas, or it can run on liquid fuel, like your diesel or distillate. But here is the golden rule, folks. It's gas or liquid, never, ever, both at the same time. The engine enforces the separation so rigorously because, well, blending them, it's a recipe for instant mechanical disaster. It would completely, instantly destabilize the entire combustion process. Okay, let's dive into this, because inside that engine's core sits a combustor ring equipped with exactly 30 precise nozzle jets. And every single one of those 30 nozzles has to fire flawlessly and continuously in just unbelievable heat. Just imagine the sheer volume of fuel and air rushing through that confined space every millisecond. It's wild. If even one nozzle sprays at a slightly wrong angle or underperforms or overfires, the entire thermal balance of the engine gets completely thrown off. The precision we're talking about here is absolutely staggering. So how do we get all 30 of those nozzles working in perfect harmony? It all comes down to a process called atomization. Basically, atomization is just precisely metering and spraying the fuel into a superfine, even mist so that every single nozzle burns cleanly and equally. And honestly, this is the whole secret to the engine's fuel flexibility. By absolutely nailing that perfectly atomized mist, you can take the exact same engine and run it on a freezing, remote offshore platform using stored liquid fuel, or drop it in the middle of a desert running on pipeline natural gas. The fuel changes, yeah, but the ultimate goal of perfect continuous atomization, that stays exactly the same. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the physical boundaries to get that perfect atomization exist in totally different worlds depending on the fuel. Take natural gas. It has to be bone dry. The strict engineering limit here is that the gas absolutely must be maintained at a minimum of 50 degrees Fahrenheit above its saturated vapor dew point right at the manifold. Now, liquid fuel, completely different challenge. It needs ultra-fine 20-micron filtering, and it has to sit within a super tight viscosity band between 0.5 and 6.0 centistokes just to start the thing. Look, these aren't just polite recommendations from the manufacturer. These are the literal physical boundaries of safe operation. So let's walk through this severe mechanical cause and effect if you happen to ignore those boundaries. We'll start with natural gas. What happens if your gas fuel temperature drops below that strict 50-degree Fahrenheit dew point margin? Well, the gas condenses. Suddenly, you've got liquid hydrocarbon droplets forming inside your gas fuel system. And when those liquid droplets hit the combustor, they do not burn like a gas. They burn like heavy liquid bombs. This triggers wildly uneven burning across those 30 nozzles, and suddenly your perfectly balanced system is totally compromised. You get extreme thermal imbalance where some sections of the combustor ring get drastically hotter than others, and that uneven expansion, that is exactly what drives premature component cracking in the metal. Ultimately, failing to keep the gas bone dry means you're running wet gas, and wet gas equals complete combustion chaos. You aren't just losing a few megawatts here, you're actively fighting the physical design of the machine. Those hotspots from the burning condensed droplets can actually get so severe they physically warp the internal geometry of the turbine. In the absolute worst-case scenarios, this violent, unstable combustion can even trigger a compressor surge. Think of it as a catastrophic aerodynamic stall inside the engine that literally sounds like a bomb going off. It can do immense structural damage. Okay, so we know the massive danger of wet gas. Let's flip over to liquid fuel for a second. Quick check for you. If the liquid fuel viscosity runs way too high, meaning it's too thick, it's out of spec when it reaches that tiny nozzle orifice, what do you think physically happens to the spray pattern inside the combustor? Seriously, take a second to just visualize it. You're trying to force this thick, syrupy fluid through a tiny little nozzle that was specifically engineered to produce a fine mist. Well, if you guess that the spray distorts, you hit the nail right on the head. Thick fuel equals a distorted spray. Because the fuel is just too viscous, it completely fails to atomize into that beautiful, even, cone-shaped mist we need. Instead, it might just kind of dribble out or shoot out in a really concentrated, narrow stream. And because the spray is distorted, your air and fuel aren't mixing evenly at all. The direct result, some nozzles end up burning significantly hotter than the others. Just like with the wet gas we talked about, this distorted spray drives massive thermal cracking. It's a different root cause, sure, but it leads to the exact same destructive thermal imbalance across the combustor ring.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core takeaway here. There is a direct, undeniable relationship between the condition of your fuel and the mechanical effect on the engine itself. Ideal spec fuel gives you even heat and a smooth-running machine. Wet gas, that gives you immediate thermal imbalance and cracking. Thick liquid fuel gives you a distorted cone and dangerous hotspots. You see, fuel quality is a strict physical necessity dictated by thermodynamics and fluid dynamics. It's not just some bureaucratic checklist you tick off for fun. If the fuel is out of spec, the metal inside the engine pays the ultimate price, every single time.
Let's just quickly reorient ourselves on where we are in the operational journey of this turbine. Before this, we talked about the starting sequence, how we use a hydraulic starter to basically wake the giant up and get the air moving. Now we've covered the atomization target, why gas and liquid fuels have those strictly defined quality windows to keep combustion stable while the engine is actually running. But what happens when you need to turn it off? Well, that brings us to our next critical topic. And honestly, it is a trap that catches a lot of new engineers completely off guard. See, fuel quality is what keeps your combustion stable in the moment. But there is one very specific, highly damaging mistake you can make during the shutdown process when you're running on liquid fuel. If you miss a single drain valve procedure, the residual heat of the engine will literally bake that fuel right inside the nozzle permanently, clogging it up with hard carbon. It's a phenomenon called coking, and it can turn a totally routine shutdown into a catastrophic, multi-thousand-dollar failure. Which leaves us with a pretty intense question to think about. What if the absolute most dangerous moment for your turbine isn't when it's running at full power, but the exact moment you try to turn it off? We're going to dive deep into the coking trap in part 2.